Today, 16 things every reefer should know about picking the right controller or monitor.
What we wish somebody had told us day one. The most direct answer to this question is some reefers in their tanks will benefit from a full-on controller install, but 100% of reefers in their tanks will benefit from a monitor at least. And to get the heart of that question, we polled 100 fish in coral and asked them this question. How soon would you like us to know about a catastrophic event going on in your environment? And survey says, immediately.
Every tank and those inside it will benefit from a real-time monitoring solution. Not one tank is excluded. Everything past that is gravy.
I like auto water changes. I like auto top-offs. I like flipping a switch and having maintenance mode go down. I like all that stuff. But really what it's about is starting with the safety of all the animals in there, and then we'll build on top of that. Number two, shifting from monitor to controller. The fact is you already own a whole lot of controllers. You may not have thought of them that way, but it's a heater controller, a pump controller, the thing that turns on and off your lights. Unless you're standing there at your heater, unplugging and plugging in the wall, man, you have a controller. The reason you're watching this video is because those things are not redundant. Most of them aren't all that trustworthy. And when they fail, they require you to actually sit there and be there to know and physically fix it. So what is the aquarium controller really about?
Well, take for example, something like the Apex or the GHL. They're really there to back up those controllers that you already have. That way, unless you're physically at home all the time and you never sleep, they will alert you when there's that problem.
Redundancy and notification. Number three, the nature of an aquarium controller and picking the best option is you actually need to trust that it's going to work when you need it and build that multi-year tank. We're not talking about things that are going to happen the next 12 months. We're talking about things that are going to happen 3, 4, 5 years. I need to trust that it's going to actually be able to do that. And in order to trust something like that, really they need to have been around that long to begin with. And for that reason, the community has really adopted some options that they trust the most. What are they?
There are some great options out there, but some of the most common ones are going to be your GHL, your Apex, your Milwaukee, or your Pinpoint pH monitor.
When I started the hobby, that is where I started, which was with the Milwaukee and Pinpoints. Real simple. You plug it in the wall, set the pH to wherever you need, and then it controls it. It would turn off. I set it off the first time I had the Kalkwasser overflow in my tank. Well, I didn't want that to happen again. I put on the pH controller on there. So you build upon that, but of the actual bigger aquarium controllers, there's really only two that have been around and trusted by the general reefing community long enough to say, I know that this thing will be there when I need it. It's GHL and the Neptune Apex for sure.
Number 4, a series of standalone controllers and single parameter monitors are the best for someone who's looking for initial setup simplicity and the cost isn't a factor.
Yeah, because like if I want to set up my calcium reactor and set the pH to 6.4, I could do it in an Apex or a GHL, and I gotta go, set the whole thing up. Or I could take a Milwaukee, I could plug it in the wall, turn it to 6.4, and be done.
So easy.
Yeah, so easy. Now, the nature of why people don't do that as often these days is because it just costs a lot more. And redundancy now costs a lot more. Whereas like an Apex or a GHL has 2 ports. I could actually have redundant pH ports. So like control the pH inside the reactor, but also monitor the tank. Either one of these things would be off, it would catch. With this case, I'd have 2 Milwaukees, and by then I might as well buy just a aquarium controller. But if you're looking for initial setup simplicity, and like, hey man, I hear the message, I want to back up my critical gear, but I just really don't want to spend a lot of time or effort thinking about it, something like the Milwaukee and pH or Pinpoint pH controllers or other controllers like that, really the simplest solution. Also, inside of that is the heater controller. Yeah. Right. So when you back up your heater with another temperature controller behind it, that's a solution. Again, you can see how it's easy, but really doesn't stack up as the most cost-effective solution.
So many wires too. So many wires.
Boom. Number 5, there is a biggest bang for the buck in all of this. And if you're only going to monitor one thing, let it be this.
the heater monitor, the temperature controller, really. It is obviously the most bang for your buck because the heater is the most likely thing that is going to fail. I mean, did you know that heaters and their controllers, some of the most popular ones out there, are only warranted for 6 months? I mean, that means that the manufacturer only thinks this is going to last for 6 months, and I think we want it to last longer than that.
It's us that believes it's going to last for years for some reason. The person that made it doesn't believe that.
That's true.
Okay, so this is the number one thing. Like, this is when we say this at the beginning of the videos of, I wish somebody had told me this day one, and I believed it and embraced it because it will help me be more successful. It's forget all the rest of this stuff. It's just back up that heater and then have a monitor to tell you when it fails.
Number 6, the second biggest bang for your buck will be any sort of multi-parameter monitor. We're talking something that does pH, leaks, power outages, and temperature. And ideally, it's going to be expandable and grow with you over time.
You're starting to see more and more and more of these things out there. The Apex Junior came out. You can do that with the smaller GHL. You're starting to see leaks of this show up in things like the CJ pump.
Yeah.
The Red Sea auto top-off has some monitoring controls in it. But really, the biggest bang for the buck will be something that does multi-parameter monitoring. I'm looking for that pH. I'm looking for leaks, pH being a chemistry issue. Power outages, which if you live in California or anywhere the power goes out frequently, this is going to be a big issue for you. Temperature. And ideally, man, we're expanding beyond that. We can do salinity, we can do ORP, calcium, alkalinity, magnesium. We can do all the kinds of different things. And even power monitoring, which allows us to monitor the performance of every single piece of equipment that's plugged in, know if it's working. That will be the second biggest bang for the buck. Number 7, decide how you want to be notified of an issue, because most of the controllers you probably already own, like the one on top of your heater, will only notify you if you see it. You have to actually be there, see it, it's flashing at you maybe. But decide how you want to be notified of these issues. Which are the options to be notified?
Okay, I mean, obviously you have a visual that you actually have to look at it. You have an audible, something that makes hopefully a loud sound and is annoying enough that you're gonna go over and check it out. Or a mobile one is perfect for when you're not at home.
So some of these have combinations of it. So the ones that come to mind is with a heater, often they don't have an audible. It would just flash at you. But if you put your heater underneath your stand, you would never see the flash. So if you could put it somewhere where you can actually see it, that'd be a better controller. But I think of the water level controller from Tunes, the oscillator.
It's so loud, that alarm.
If it goes too loud, ear piercing, on purpose. It's saying, come save me, save the tank. It's supposed to like wake you up, come do something about this really bad event that happened to the tank. But also, there's now monitors out there like the Junior and even within the GHLX universe, which will be, I'm going to go on to my phone. It's going to start, doing push notifications, telling me something to do about it. But the new generation of the Apex also has an audible alarm built into it. Oh. So like sometimes I might not wake up, from that event. You can actually turn on, my buddy had one in his basement, and he plugged into one of the outlets on the Apex, a horn.
What?
Yeah, I mean, almost like a fire alarm, a horn that goes off, because he put a lot of time, it's built into his bar, he put a lot of time and effort. If something's wrong, I want to wake up. So decide how you want to be notified of an issue, because some of the standalone options out there will really require that you're there. Some of them will allow you to see it, some will allow you to hear it, and some of them will allow you to do it mobily. Number 8, the third biggest bang for the buck is actually the ability to do something about it remotely or automatically. And this is where we get into what a traditional aquarium controller is, meaning that it has a power bar connected to it and is turning on and off these outlets.
Oh, those power bars make a world of difference, because not only can you be away and use it as a simple controller, turn it on and off, but you can actually start programming those things and thinking them not as just an outlet, but thinking them as, oh, this is my protein skimmer, oh, this is my return pump, and do something about it, either automatically or manually, if that's simple.
And so automatically means you could get really fancy with the programming, or you could just like hit the button that says task on it and fill in the couple of prompts that it asks you. It will now not be an outlet, it's now a heater. And it knows what to do with it automatically. It's set in safety measures, so it will turn on and off that heater if it goes beyond that range. It will notify you if it goes beyond that range. And that's why the biggest bang, or the third biggest bang for the buck, past knowing about the problem, is the ability to do something about that problem, either remotely, manually with your finger, or just automatically doing it for you. Number 9, now we're kind of getting into which model is right for you, and one of them is decide if scalability is important to you.
I mean, that's a really good question to ask because a lot of us beginners start out with something small. So we might think, oh, we only need like a pinpoint or something really small. But do you think that your love of this hobby is going to grow? And I'll tell you what, it probably will. And you might want to scale. So when you're looking at these, you might want to ask yourself, if I want to add things on later, can I do that?
Are you a technology nerd? Are you a gear junkie? Do you like plugging more stuff in and expanding it and building upon, the ecosphere that you've built and doing it better and better every single year? Well, scalability is absolutely that. Or the ability to even upgrade something when something comes out. And so just a note, there are options within either ecosphere that you can pick. So with GHL, they have a couple of the full scale models. They also have the junior or the smaller option, right? That smaller option is really designed for a beginner reefer that just has a handful of things. It could be an advanced reefer, I guess, too, but just wants to monitor a handful of things, but it really isn't scalable like the full model is. In the case of the Apex, their junior model, it starts out as just a monitor, is scalable all the way to being the exact same thing as a Pro, by just plugging in more modules. You're never stuck like, oh man, I wish I had bought. The only real difference is the Junior doesn't have an Ethernet port. It's Wi-Fi, right? So if the Ethernet port's really important to you and the reliability of a wire is important to you, then in that case, the Apex or the Apex Pro would be the right move. But other than that, every single other thing you could get from the Junior and the monitor solution and scale it up to the entire universe without a beat, it would function the exact same.
Number 10, consider how many outlets you need. Take each plug and say, would I want to know if this failed on or off? Would I want the ability to turn it on or off remotely or automatically? Emergency or convenience?
Yeah, so for example, we've beat the heater to death.
Yes.
In that case, I very much want to plug this in and back that up. But what about like a light? Do I need to control the light remotely or automatically?
That's a really good question. I mean, in Palm Springs in the summertime, if my air conditioner breaks, sometimes my heat in the house can rise dramatically. And if all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, it's 80, 81 degrees, I need the ability to turn everything off as soon as possible to keep that heat down.
That could be as simple as somebody in the household decided it's a good idea to open the windows today or turn off the air. Yes. I would want the lights to turn off and stop, heat and overheating the tank. This is specifically true if you happen to have a hood where it traps a lot of the heat inside there. So, but also there's a convenience portion of it. Like for me, I would set up, they have little switches that you can connect to your Apex. They're toggle switches. Adaptive Reef makes them.
Those are so nice.
I don't know if there's one sitting around here, but they make little toggle switches, almost like fire switches.
Right,
so you can,
spaceship, when you're going to launch, Yeah,
and so the way I'd use it is I would turn on maintenance mode that way. So I would flip the switch, it would turn off all of my return pumps, it would turn off all of my power heads, it would turn off all my lights so the lights aren't hitting the corals when they're exposed. I do clean my sand, do a water change or whatever I'm gonna do.
So convenient.
And it turned off everything, and then with a flick of a switch, I go and I turn it back on.
I think that's super important as well, because how many times have experienced reefers tried to turn everything off and then forgotten to turn one thing on? And then you're in some huge trouble.
Well, there's also things like a return pump or power heads. Now you would say initially, do I need to plug in my power head in here to know if it's failing on or off? Well, with power monitoring, which monitors how much energy it's actually consuming, the beauty of it is it won't just tell you that it failed off and they should go fix that power head. As those things get dirty and they start to slow down, you might be 50% of the flow. What happens is they actually take half of the energy as well. Alarm's going to send you saying, hey, that thing that should be taking 50 watts is really only taking 25 watts, and you should clean it. All right, so instead of just randomly cleaning stuff, now I have the information to be able to act on it. And if I really wanted to get nerdy about it, if I had a DC pump, I could actually just turn it up a little bit with this type of control as well. So think about all of the outlets and how many, count all the plugs that you have and then count how many plugs you want. And then you're gonna have to add it up. So something like the GHL will have 6 plugs coming out of the box and the Apex will have 8 plugs. There are some ports on the side though that can run like dosing pumps and power heads and stuff as well. So I think they call it the 832, which is like 8 outlets and 3 of the 1 links or something, but it can run a lot more stuff than just 8 outlets. So figure out how many things you want to run, and then you can pick the right solution. And sometimes you may need to pick up an additional energy bar if you really want to control everything. Number 11, the 4th biggest bang in the buck. I think a lot of people actually would say is number 1, but for me, I just rank it a little lower, but this is what it is.
Yeah, it's eliminating those undesirable tasks. You mean, we're talking about dosing chemicals, doing your calcium testing, your alkalinity testing, topping off solutions, feeding. I mean, water changes, maintenance modes, there's so many things it can do.
Anybody who's ever implemented an auto water change system, A, their tank is more successful, and B, they're like, where have you been all my life?
I still haven't done it, I need to.
Okay, same thing with an auto top off. Anybody who has been topping off with, by hand versus an auto top off will say, where you been all my life? Same thing with dosing chemicals, 2-part where the dosing pump's been all my life. So the reason that I put this 4th, man, is because all the other stuff we talked about so far, like mission critical.
Yes.
Right? Even though these are really, really, really desirable, every one of them, nice to have, I could replace with just manual effort.
Yeah.
And manual effort in this case would be really largely accurate and consistent to my willingness to do it.
But you gotta do it.
Yeah, so if you're really, really consistent and willing to do it, it's accurate and safe to do all this stuff by hand, doing water change and all this stuff, but you don't have to test calcium and alkalinity all, like here, we found for sure, testing alkalinity, number 1 thing that keeps me in pulse with my tank.
Yeah.
Do I actually want to do it every day? No. Do I want to be able to have to like see it or have to chart it so I can actually see what happens as I make other things? No. Would I like somebody to do it for me? Yes. It's called the Trident. Number 12, sometimes you are technology handcuffed, so you may not have the technology to use technology at your house.
Yeah, our family's actually a Mac family. I do all my video editing on a Macintosh. So we don't, you too, we don't have anything other than that. So some of these options will only work with a PC, isn't that right?
Well, I wouldn't say only work. So historically, GHL was PC and Windows friendly. They have now added in apps. I read the thing today about it. And basically, there's a lot of the stuff that you can do that would be in the Windows thing that also works on the app now. But there are a handful of things, and they say they're coming. The one thing that seems to be the hangover here is that you have to have a Windows computer to be able to update the firmware.
So that could be big.
Yeah, when new things come out and new technology comes out, like for instance, you may not think of firmware, some of you do very often, but what happens if they come out with a brand new testing apparatus? Well, you have to update the unit to actually know what that thing is.
It's totally doable. I mean, I'm sure you know someone who has a PC, but that's just an added hassle to have to bring them over, connect it to a PC, and go from there. And let's be honest too, a lot of those updates aren't just for additions. They fix problems that currently happen.
So it's just something to think about. Most homes probably have a Windows computer in it, so if you want to use that. I know my household for the last 7 years didn't have one. For whatever reason, my wife bought one last week, a laptop. Right? So I'm golden. Whereas the Apex is largely based on either the app or a window, browser window. So if you were going to use it on a computer, you would do it through the browser window, which allows you actually, it's probably the best way to actually program it, is the browser window on whatever computer you want to use. It's not specific, but think about it a little bit. If you own or don't own certain technology, some of these options may be better for you. Number 13, Salinity Probes. They come with the nicest models in most cases, but how important are they?
You know, honestly, they're really just not that important. Salinity is something in our tanks, unless there's something catastrophic, that changes really slowly. And what, there's used to be 40 tanks here? How many times has the Salinity Probe saved a tank?
Okay, none. Not one. So I commonly say that the Apex here saves a tank here about once a month. And that sounds like a lot, but when you have dozens and dozens of tanks, Well, that's equivalent to saving your tank every couple of years,
Yeah.
right? Just the stuff happens all the time. Okay, but Salinity Probe, never, not once, has ever saved a tank here. I don't calibrate it anymore. I don't, if it dies, I don't replace it. There's a lot of people probably here, they're like, Ryan, why are you saying that? But I don't know, I just don't use the Salinity Probe. So it's not super high up my list of things that really matter. And the reason for that is almost every single thing out there, or every other thing that would happen to the tanks would be captured by a different sensor.
What do you mean?
It means like if for whatever reason I was flooding the tank with fresh water, I would catch it with a water level sensor or a leak sensor on the floor. If for whatever reason the auto water change broke and it was only flooding in the salinity, I'd probably catch it with the Trident and elevated calcium and alkalinity. I'd probably catch it with the float sensor. I'd probably catch it with the leak sensor. I'd catch it with all kinds of other things. And to be honest, the Salinity probes generally need to be calibrated semi-frequently. They're just like, if I was going to decide which one of the systems out there to pick for me, Salinity just wouldn't be real high up the list. Number 14, you probably appreciate this one more than ever.
I was a holdout. I'm gonna admit it, I was a holdout because ORP and ozone scared me, but it's so simple to utilize, and it might be the most underutilized option on a reef tank. Oxidants just kick butt.
So ORP is commonly misunderstood. It is a reference point as to how much organics to oxidants are in the water. And organics really means pollutants, right? ORP, higher ORP or lower ORP does not mean your tank is cleaner or dirtier than one. But it does mean if I had a pretty stable ORP in my tank and all of a sudden it went up, it does mean it's cleaner. Less organics in there in a vast majority of cases. You could nitpick or lawyer this one if you wanted to, but in a vast majority of cases, if the ORP went dramatically down, probably something big and organic either died or got spilled into the tank. So I tell you that. But ozone, this is the thing that for me, in my ecosphere, all the people that I trust and share their experience with me, more and more people are using ozone. A couple of examples of that is I've seen people that have had bacterial diseases and stuff on fish that they can't get rid of. They turn on the ozone, all of a sudden they eradicate. I've seen all of a sudden like algae production and stuff going. Enough that I tried it on my own tank that was having dinos and diatom problems and stuff. We turned it on Friday, it came back on Monday, man, pristine, just gone. Problem I've been fighting for years, gone, right?
That's amazing.
Just turn on. And the way that I'm using ozone, like most people will turn it on to just have maintain some specific ORP. For me, I was just trying to add some oxidants to the tank. And so I turn it on for an hour a night.
That's it?
Right, and the lowest setting, an hour a night. But I do use the ORP probe to make sure that it never goes over a safety threshold, right? And the reason I use it at night is because I don't want to breathe all the ozone and everything in there. I don't need ozone all the time. And some of those oxidants, I just need to add in there, but it worked for me. And this is one of the values that you get when you pick up various levels of controller. Some of them only have a pH probe. Some of them will also come with ORP, and this is how you would use it. At number 15, this is kind of an oddball one, but it speaks to me specifically, which is if I was shopping for any controller and I'm thinking future forward and I'm thinking about a lot of different things, one of them is I pick options that have a controller board available, primarily because it turns that rat's nest of cords and everything into something clean, and clean is synonymous with safe. Have you used a board?
Oh, I only use boards. I mean, at one point I had 7 tanks set up in my little living room studio, and every single one of them had a board. Not only is it easier, but you have all heard horror stories. And if you haven't, you should have, of where you just create that water highway, you know? And water and electricity can mean fire, and that's just not safe for your family.
Okay, I've been doing this long enough. I can tell you 2 things, that like 88% of tanks out there are just a rat's nest under there, and a rat's nest is almost always unsafe, almost always no drip loops. And there's a portion of those that started off day one, they were super clean. But when you need to pull all the wires out to clean your power heads or replace a pump, before you know it, man, in 2 years, it's just a rat's nest again. However, every single tank that I've seen that uses a controller board, those things look clean. right? And the inherent way that where all the cords go, in the most cases, actually eliminates those water freeways going into the outlet and just means that it's a lot safer. So when you're thinking about picking out a controller, think about a controller that has one of these boards available, because it's just a way, way, way easier way to set it up clean and safe. Number 16, when you're considering a controller, think about the cords and how you intend on mounting it, because it might play a role in which one you pick as well.
Yeah, you know, every single one of these systems does it slightly different. For example, your GHL controller has to lie flat, so you need somewhere to kind of sit it on and then plug the cords in behind, while the Apex, on the other hand, all the cords go on the bottom and then the modules are all separate.
Yeah, so like actually the GHL Mini will mount kind of like the Apex, which is a little box and the cords are coming out and mounts flush. Whereas the GHL Profilux, that is actually a little box that, you know, kind of needs to have a tray that you're going to sit on. It has a little monitor on the front of it. And then all the cords come out of the back, right? And then if you want to add more modules, it's actually just like little cards, like expansion cards that you slide into it. So all the cords are kind of coming from one area.
That's nice.
Yeah, just got to think about where you're going to mount, you know, something that doesn't mount flush to the wall, because you're going to want to see that display, essentially. You wouldn't really want to aim it up and then have the cords out. So it's going to come out, you're going to need a little tray for it, and then all the modules come out of here. Whereas with the Apex, you know, the reason that they designed it, you might see it like the Apex pops up, you know. It's to eliminate all of the drip loops and or the water freeways. If the cords are aimed down, the chances that you're going to water climb up are near zero. Also, in this case, whereas you can look at the bottom of the Apex and see how many ports there are, and they're pretty equal or similar ports between the different options. But if you want to expand, where this one you put the little cards in, on this one, if you want to expand to add more modules in and more probes, it comes with little additional modules that are, you know, they're on their own. Now, that's going to add a few more cords to the matrix, but it also allows you to do more flexibility. Like, I don't have to all cords go to one place. They can be where I want them. So you can, you know, adjust it, but think about a little bit about cords and how you intend on mounting. If it's going to mount flush, you know, probably the Apex. If you want to mount it on a tray, then probably the GHL is a better option. Number 17, also consider, like, if you really want a visual display, because they don't all have them.
Yeah, some of us really like to be able to look at our control boards and see what exactly is happening, and both of these don't do that. For example, these do have visual. The GHL has a visual display, but the Apex doesn't. And does that really matter? It's something to consider.
That's kind of one of the trade-offs. Like, for instance, you know, the Apex has 8 outlets and the GHL only has 6. I lost a couple of pieces of equipment. But I also do. I have that little controller or the display on the front, and I have some push buttons that I can do on the front to actually control it in person, you know, if I want to, right? Whereas if I wanted to do that with the Apex, I'd have to buy a $100 controller as a little display. Now, the little display will give you all the buttons and the ability to do a bunch of that stuff and a visual display. And you can actually configure it to show the exact parameters that you want. And it can give you a bunch of different windows, actually. So you can have different tanks all hooked up to it and have, you know, kind of like, oh, that's that tank, that's that tank, that's that tank. But in either case, what I do personally, I actually usually do buy one of those displays because I just like to see it. But in most cases, really, it's just a tablet. You know, go get the most inexpensive tablet that you can find. You can pick them up now for like $50. Get a tablet that has a browser display in it. And then just turn it to stay on all the time. And now you can kind of configure the Apex Fusion dashboard so you can toggle and slide it up and down and pick all the cool things you want and have just like a really cool like color display. Not just like, you know, the pH is 6, man, but you can have all the graphs and everything. You can also operate the feed modes and everything from it. It's just a lot easier. So consider how you want to do the visual display and whether or not you even need one for your tank.
All right, so all that said, what would I pick? 2 options for you. Either a single Inkbird heater controller if you want the bare minimum, or the Apex, but I always like to get the extra EB832 bar because I just like to have more outlet options.
That's 16 outlets, plus all the 3 twos on the side. I do also. In most cases, I want to plug it all in there just because that's who I am, and I use all the little toggle switches and the magnetic reed switches and the one button. So I want to do everything from this ecosphere. I want to be able to turn it all on and off, and so I'll splurge on that thing too. But it's interesting that you would do the single Inkbird heater controller. I don't really think that there is a super spectacular heater controller standalone. Most of the options, but I think that's an option where you could really think about how do I get into the lowest cost actual aquarium controller, get all those benefits plus the heater controller as well. That leads right into my picks, which aren't all that different. In my case, I would do the Apex Junior as if a cache was limited option. Plug in the EB4, which gives me 4 outlets. Now it is a heater controller. We'll turn it on and off. It could turn off my lights in your case. It could do 4 really essential items. It's also going to give you the benefit of fusion, which means I can log all of my test kit parameters. I can see them. Gives me notes. Gives me reminders. Gives me the power outage and the heartbeat. Gives me all those different things combined with monitoring the chemistry, leaks, all this stuff. So this two combo would probably be if cache was limited, where I'd go. But if cache wasn't limited, I wouldn't actually go all the way to the Pro.
You wouldn't.
Right? Well, I mean, if money is no object, of course.
Right.
But assuming that, we're in the realm of $1,000 now, right. Money's still an object. For me, I would get the normal Apex just because I'm not probably going to use the Salinity Probe a whole lot. And then I would couple it with another PM1, which is a Probe Module 1, which gives me another heater. So I can actually have redundant heater temperature, one of which you can use in different ways. One, you can test the tank, and one you could test the sump, which are different in some cases, especially if the return pump breaks. But you also can test the ambient air with it, which in your case is a big deal, right? So if somebody opened that window and all of a sudden it's 100 degrees, well, the temperature of the room is a precursor to the temperature of the tank.
And it's going to let you know any problems before the tank temperature rises.
Yep, and it also adds another ORP probe or a pH probe, and I believe an IO sensor for switches and stuff is in there as well. And then I would add 2 doses.
Okay.
So for me, the doses is the best possible solution that I've come across for dosing chemicals, 2-part, and not, because it allows it to do it accurately and safely. It's never failed me on any of the tanks here, and it does it automatically adjusts for the type of stuff you're dosing. If I'm gonna dose 100 milliliters, instead of just spurting 100 milliliters of alkalinity in there, it automatically can set it over a long time, just drip it out real slow into an area, change chemistry really slow. It's optimized to the application. Optimized for the application, why I'd want a second one, out of water changes. I don't want to live without out of water changes in my life again. I don't want to haul a tube around and do the siphons and stuff anymore. And this thing, I used it, pumped it up into the ceiling, sent it 40 feet away, and it just works. Calibrate it. It's really, really flexible and strong. So for me, Apex, normal one, PM1, and 2 doses. So did you learn something new or unexpected about aquarium controllers today? Hopefully the right one for you. There's more in our Controllers Did You Know playlist right here, and new episodes of BRStv released every Monday and Friday.